your presence here. And I'll give you a brief intro about our panel, and then we'll have the panelists to give their presentations and the information on the mineral deal. So as you all know, minerals are an essential part of our daily lives, from the technologies we are using right now to have this conference, as well as to green technologies like solar and wind power, and also for the range of defense infrastructure. In this context, the mineral deal negotiated between the United States and Ukraine is particularly important to consider, both from the point of view of regional security and also from broader questions of securing supply chains for the economic development. Ukraine will itself need enormous amounts of minerals for reconstruction of its infrastructure after the war. To start the discussion, I am noting the key provisions of the agreement on the slide, which has been learned recent from public sources. So can you please put up the slide, please?
I'm also sharing it. If they want to put it on WebEx, I've just
not this
it.
one, not this one, the next one. Do you have the other one? Not this one.
I've just shared
okay,
it on my
okay. Professor Saleem is sharing it. Please let him share his screen. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have here, you can have a look at it. So I will leave this slide up for you to browse as I introduce our panelists who will help us to understand the ways in which such linkages between geology and diplomacy can be better realized. So I will go to my first panelist and I will introduce him, Mr. Vladimir Sabil. He is a member of the Ukrainian Parliament and the Secretary of Budget Committee and Chairman of the Temporary Investigative Commission on Public Procurement Violations. Mr. Vladimir, I have two questions for you, so I will give you both the questions so you can answer both of them and I don't have to interrupt you then. So my first question to you is, what has each side gained from the recent minerals deal between Ukraine and the United States? And my second question to you is, how can we link the minerals deal to the reconstruction and rebuilding of Ukraine? Thank you so much.
Thank you. So first of all, good evening, and it's a pleasure for me to participate here. So as a member of Ukrainian Parliament, I would say that the fact that we had this deal was a big thing for the country. Even from the amount of votes that we had in the parliament when we ratified the deal, so we had, I think, like 338 or something votes, which is more than qualified majority, more than 3/4 of the parliament. So this is very rarely happens when the parliament votes in favor of something with this amount of vote. So that was really a big thing, because there was an understanding that this deal can have big prospects for the country. I will just go back and like look a bit on the history. So historically, Ukraine was highly underfunded by foreign direct investment. So during like 34 years of independence, we had less than 60 billion of foreign direct investment in the country for the whole period. So if we look on our neighbor, Poland, for example, which is in terms of population, the same country. So in Poland, they have 30 billion of foreign direct investment per year in last 5 years. And it was about 15 billion per year in 15 years before these 5 years. So you can see that this is like a big difference. So we as a country, we are not liked by foreign investors for many reasons, like for political risks, for kind of bureaucracy. We used to have the much worse corruption story than other countries, and so on and so forth. So first of all, for Ukraine, this deal is kind of a good sign as a catalyst for not only per se, but also for other potential investors that you can enter the country. So United States is interested in investing in Ukrainian, let's say, mineral, in Ukrainian industries, in Ukrainian infrastructure, because we are talking about mineral deal, but it's not only mineral deal. So this deal is also about infrastructure, if you read the text. So this deal is a good catalyst. And for us, it was very important that it is ratified to show that other investors can also enter the country. So we as a country, we will start doing a lot of the things to kind of reduce not only the country risk, but to reduce bureaucracy and so on and so forth. So other important aspect why this deal is a good thing for Ukraine was the deal per se. So of course, it can be a catalyst for others kind of to invest in the country, but it also by itself, if the fund is up and running, and if both parties, like United States, will start contributing to the fund, and Ukraine will start contributing on top of the license fees and rent that is included in the deal, but we are also allowed to contribute with something else. And when we start contributing, so we can have the significant boost of investments in the country just by this fund itself. This boost can be smaller, but in this case, that catalyst role will still remain. And this boost can be like a big. For example, we can contribute some of the state-owned assets to this fund because we have a problem with corporate governance of state-owned assets, which are not managed well, and we don't want to prioritize for many reasons. I think that kind of a mistake, but as a country, we decided not to do. But considering that the fund would be owned by Ukraine, like partially, so we might start doing that. So that could be another opportunity for like future opportunities from this deal that we as a country can enjoy in the future. But also, I think from the U.S. perspective, so this deal is a good thing because so there are 2 points. First of all, in the new U.S. administration, there is a need to understand what United States gets on top of gets for the arms support that they provide to us. So this economical cooperation can provide an answer like to a lot of United States officials, but also United States is trying to reduce the dependency on the imports of some critical resources, being it lithium, titanium, or even like simple iron ore. So from the countries that are, let's say, from some unstable regions. So I think in this term, Ukraine can be that kind of additional insurance, additional source of those resources in the future. And I think another aspect that is important that Ukraine, in terms of technologies, in terms of environmental kind of improvements in the industries and especially in the mining industries, so we are lagging behind. And I think that deal, when we start exercising some of its part, that can provide some access to those technologies for the country. So just to summarize, so I think this is the fact that we had this deal and that we ratified it as a parliament like very quickly, like in several days, is very good for our country. So that on one side it provides signal to the foreign investors that you might start investing in the country, but on the other side, it also the fund itself can become a good catalyst for the investment in the industries, but also in the infrastructure of the country. So that both will be a significant boost to the country recovery. So we need a lot of money. We need like hundreds of billions of dollars. There are different numbers, like 500 billion. There are like smaller estimates, 300 billion, but it's hundreds of billions to fully recover the country. So that deal is a good catalyst to start, not to start, but to foster that recovery process. Wajiha.
Okay, thank you so much. I will ask from the audience if they have a question to Mr. Vladimir, because he will leave a little bit earlier. So if we have any questions from the audience, otherwise we can go to the next speaker. Is there somebody who would like to ask a question from Mr. Vladimir? Okay, please.
Thank you for your briefing. I'm Colonel Păunescu from Security and Defense Faculty here in Bucharest. And I'm interested to know if you have any kind of resistance for this mineral deal from the civilian side. And if you can talk a little bit about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I can start answering?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So this is a very good question, because indeed at the beginning of those negotiations there used to be some resistance, mainly because of two topics. So first question that was kind of in the air was that we as a country give too much to the United States. And that was resulted from the fact that there were some preliminary documents that no one signed. I think there were some, like one of the version of one of the negotiation that looked like that. But the final agreement that we had, it does not kind of include those articles that were not liked by civil society. So at the end of the day, the overall public public reception was very positive. And you can even see it from the fact that all political parties and groups, and we have represented different parts of the society, and we have 4 parties and 4 groups, so basically 8 parties in the parliament, all of them voted in favor of that deal. So there was no single party that did not vote, which very rarely happens in Ukrainian parliament. So and the second part of the resistance was that this deal does not include any. It was not resistance; it was a critic. It does not include any security guarantee. Which for me personally, it was not strange, because this is economical deal. So you cannot, of course, we can have let's say the deal that has both. But if you think about that deal as an only economical deal, and even negotiation team from Ukrainian and US side, they were fully from the economical part of the administration. So I think that deal could not include that. But there is a hidden, let's say, I would say it's not security guarantee, but there is a hidden security aspect that was well received by the society, is the fact that the potential future US military weapon contribution will be included as a additional equity contribution to the fund by United States. So this is kind of a positive sign, and it also partially you can say that this is like an element of the security guarantee, because US will be motivated to provide additional support to Ukraine, because now it will not be just the grant, not to Ukraine. It will be, they will get the equity in that fund as a payment for that. So those were two things. There were a lot of discussions, a lot of different points raised during the kind of the process of signing the deal. But when it was voted in the parliament, and when everyone saw the final documents, I think now I would say that 80. I didn't see the number, but my guess would be the approval rating of that deal would be 80% plus in the country.
Thank you. Is there another question? Please introduce yourself.
Thanks very much, sir. I'm Commander Justin Dargan. I'm the U.S. Naval Attaché here in Bucharest. I thought it was very smart and important that you highlighted that you can't separate, this is an economical deal, not a defense deal. But I do think there is an important connection. You can't really separate this from the immediate primary goal, which is repelling Russia and securing peace. So how is Ukraine trying to send the message to the U.S. administration that getting the mutual fruits of this lucrative deal is ultimately going to depend on making Ukraine secure? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So I will just talk about that question, let's say, from the economical and deal negotiation perspective. So I think one of the important two important messages that we have already in that deal, that we as a country were able to make sure that the part of the deal that was ratified includes the statements where both parties acknowledge the Ukrainian contribution to the world stability and to world peace by the fact that Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapon in the Budapest Memorandum in 1994. So that is part of the preamble of the deal, and that was important point by our negotiation team. So that is included, because I can imagine that at the beginning that was not included. So other aspect is in the scope of that deal, that we let's say one of the aims for our country is to make sure that we have our security guaranteed by the fact that we have future support from the U.S. of the weapon, and it's kind of the critical point. It's not written directly that all further contributions will increase the stake and the equity of that deal held by the United States. So these kind of two things within that deal that we as a country try to convene to your country, to the United States, so that we have at least some of the security aspects let's say reflected there.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience or from our speakers? Would Professor Saleem or Carl would like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you so much, sir. I did have one question about sort of the environmental and social aspects of the regulations that would be applied to the extraction. In the deal, there is a clause around that, Ukraine has control over approvals of these projects. Is there anything you'd like to say around that? Certainly, Romania has a lot of experience with environmental conflicts over mining. And I imagine that in Ukraine, you have similar kinds of issues. So how might that be managed?
Yeah, so I think this is an important aspect. And another aspect that is also part of the deal, that no other projects or further parts of the sub-deals might not contradict the EU regulations. So I think this is for us, it's an important thing that all the ecological, all the extraction regulation that we will be passing as a part of the EU accession will be, let's say, also subject for that deal. So this is kind of an important thing. And having said that, I would say that if we do all the requirements, EU requirements for to implement the regulations about ecology and extraction, that will be a big step forward for our country. And I think in that aspect, the deal does not contradict and does not create any, let's say, any future discrepancies.
Thank you. Any other questions? Carl, would you like to ask? Okay. So then we will go to our second panelist, Dr. Saleem Hassan Ali, who is a chair and distinguished professor of geography at the University of Delaware. He also serves as a lead on critical metals at the United Nations University and honorary professor at the Sustainable Minerals Institute in Australia. So, Dr. Hassan, I have 3 questions for you, and I think I will read them to you so you can answer them. So my first question is, was the control over minerals part of the rationale for the initial Russian invasion in eastern Ukraine, as has been argued by some commentators? And my second question is minerals diplomacy also on the horizon between the United States and Russia in the Arctic? And my third question is, should we consider an international agreement on mineral supply as a means of ensuring that resources can be source of cooperation rather than conflict? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wajiha and the Scheherazade Foundation for organizing this session. So the first question with reference to the causality for the invasion, as you know, as someone who's a systems scientist, I always say you can never have unipolar causality. It's a confluence of many different factors, but there is some evidence to suggest that the rationale that was advocated for in many of the Russian media for control of eastern Ukraine was that it was a very resource-rich region. And of course, during the Soviet Union times, there has been this whole narrative of, the wealth of Ukraine and how important it was, not just mineral wealth, but agricultural wealth. So that part of eastern Ukraine does have specific kinds of mineral deposits which are significant. And it may well have been on the horizon for just the economic justification for the invasion in that area. So it is something to keep in mind, and there's a very well-established literature on resource wars where there are violent conflicts that are fought over access to minerals. The second question regarding the potential for the United States engaging with Russia on minerals, as you know, President Trump has made it clear that economic transactions are very significant in his foreign policy, and he has made statements around future engagement and economic activity with Russia. However, that remains to be seen. One important aspect of this is the Arctic, because Russia comprises more than half of the Arctic. And we do have now, because of greater maritime access, because of sea ice decreasing in winter months even, and certainly in summer months going considerably down, and we have the whole Northeast Passage, of course, the Russian sea route, as well as the Northwest Passage that are opening up, that there is much more activity for mineral exploration in the Arctic. And this has been noted also in the United States' interest in having relations with Greenland around minerals. So it is important to keep that on the horizon, that there may well be some transactional arrangements around minerals in the Arctic. And currently, there is the Arctic Council, which is a mechanism for having some sort of governance in the Arctic, but it is a very weak organization currently. The United States also has a position for an Arctic ambassador, which is currently vacant. And it's possible that the Trump administration may appoint an Arctic ambassador. And I imagine that that person's role will involve also engagement with Russia around economic activities. So that may well be the case. Finally, your third question around the potential for international coordination and having some sort of larger international diplomacy on minerals. This is something that has been suggested. in various ways. The United Nations Secretary General set up a specific panel on critical minerals last year, and they were tasked with coming up with some suggestions around mineral governance. I also serve on the International Resource Panel for the United Nations, and there we just had our meeting in Brazil last week, and one of the conversations there was around establishing an international resource agency. I will have actually a paper coming out in the journal Science on June 5th that with a group of scholars and practitioners that argues for having a global minerals trust for the green transition. If you want, I can show you the slide actually, which I sent earlier, which shows you what that trust would be like.
We'll just put the slide.
Yeah.
Can you put the slide, please?
The idea of a minerals trust specifically for those minerals which we need for renewable energy technologies and what we call a planetary objective, which will help the whole planet in terms of having more efficient energy supply and having infrastructure for communication, for example, work from home, the cables, the undersea cables that run, this meeting itself is a product of that. So those minerals which are needed for the green transition, what we have argued for in this minerals trust idea is that you could have producer and consumer countries who are able to have an agreement to make sure that you have supply security so that you do not have the kind of problem we had with China in 2012 when the rare earth minerals were suddenly constrained, and that led to a dispute with which went to the World Trade Organization and so on. So we are working on this idea of a minerals trust. The diagram that I sent, we can put that up later as well if it's not working, but it shows you the architecture of that. And for those in the audience who are interested, as I said, we have a major paper coming out on June 5th, and we are also preparing a policy brief for the Canadian hosting of the G7, which is at the end of June. So that will be also significant, that we'll be presenting that to the G7 members to consider this idea of a global minerals trust moving forward. So yes, thank you, Wajiha.
Can you please put your slide, because we have a slight issue with our technical team. They were not able to put it. So if you could briefly show the slide.
Yeah, I will put it up. Yeah,
and then maybe you can just...
But you can, in the meantime, you can continue with the
Okay.
questions.
Because are there any questions to Professor Ali from the audience? Is there somebody who would like? Okay.
Thank you very much. KURYLO Buchanan-Ponchak from the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. I'm very interested in your paper. And so if you could just repeat again the journal where it will be coming out, so I can make sure to look it up, and potentially your contact details, that would be very helpful.
Yes, sure. Yes, the journal, it's Science is the journal. It's a very reputable journal published by the American Association for Advancement of Science. And my contact details, yes, if you just Google my name, you'll find it, but it's my first name at udel.edu, universityofdelaware.edu, UDEL.
Perfect, thank you so much. And then to the question, I'm grateful that you brought up the United Nations as an organizing body for minerals diplomacy. I was curious if you had any thoughts on the OECD. The OECD, of course, runs the Minerals Forum and has put forward some best practices in terms of supply chains, and whether you see any initiatives there having value. Thank you.
Yes, so, the OECD certainly has a role to play, and their forum, that this is, by the way, the architecture of the Minerals Trust that we are proposing. But it's confined to countries who are members, and this is the challenge which we have had with the International Energy Agency. The International Energy Agency was set up under the OECD after the oil crisis, and the problem was that it was set up confined to 31 member states who could participate. And our, geology, of course, is determining where the minerals come from. So you can't just confine an organization to countries which are a political assemblage. I think OECD is a very important player in terms of standard setting, making sure you have environmental and social standards that are going to be effective. But what we have suggested is actually organizations like IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, and the CTCN, because remember, the idea of the trust is specifically for those minerals which have a planetary objective. So they are important for the green transition, for technologies which will help everyone. That is how you can make the argument that you can have some level of global agreement even on issues that may potentially impact national interests specifically. So OECD is definitely important. We have consulted with them. I have been very much in touch with especially the standard setting aspect, because the OECD has the most established principles on responsible mining particularly. But our goal is to have a bigger tent down the road than just the OECD.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience for Professor Ali? Okay. So in that case, we will move to our last speaker, and it's Karl BRUCH, who is the Director of International Programs at the Environmental Law Institute and founding President of the Environmental Peacebuilding Association. I will also ask 2 questions from you, Karl, and I'll tell you now. So my first question is to elaborate on social dimensions of a scaling up of minerals extraction, keeping in mind the conflict around development projects in Ukraine. And my second question is, what role has your institute played in resolving these conflicts? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wajiha, and also thank you to the Scheherazade Foundation for organizing this. I think it's very timely, it's very important, and it's cutting edge. I mean, we're just starting to think about, so what does this all mean? I'd like to start by answering your second question first. ELI, my organization, the Environmental Law Institute, has worked in Ukraine for more than 30 years, since the early 1990s. We've worked with the government and civil society on a range of environmental law issues, from environmental impact assessment and public participation to institution building and judicial training. Most recently, we've been working on accountability for wartime environmental damage and providing support for the post-conflict green recovery. Apropos of today's discussion, though, I'd like to go back to one of the first projects I worked on in Ukraine in the late 1990s. And we were providing technical support to what was then the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Nuclear Safety. And we were walking them through a Western-style environmental impact assessment. At the time, Ukraine had what was called an expertise law, which was inherited or adapted from the Soviet laws. And where environmental impact assessment is an analysis of the potential risks that's debated and public and transparent and finalized before the decision is made, the expertise was basically a rationale that was published at the same time the decision was made. So there was no chance for public input, no chance to challenge data or to highlight gaps or to say, well, these are other things that should be considered. And we were walking them through a Western-style EIA in the context of a natural gas concession near Ivano-Frankivsk. And it was basically following the expertise of process, but just pushing it up earlier on, and it was engaging the public. And we did the scoping discussion. We did I should say we were kind of walking them through how to do it, and they were doing it. The draft EIA and the public consultation. And at the end of the project, the local MEP&S official was, this is fantastic. Yes, it takes time, but, usually we have such a horrible relationship with the communities. can you help us do this for every other natural gas concession we have? It's like, well, the funding that from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency just allowed us to do this one, but you know how to do it now. And since then, Ukraine has developed a more Western-style EIA framework, and that was operational until the war came. And essentially, as part of the conflict, Ukraine, the government said, infrastructure that's been damaged by conflict. There was also been a kind of a removal of a lot of information on the internet regarding pollution, regarding infrastructure. This was viewed as a security risk. I mean, it could be a shopping list. It's like, oh, which facilities have which chemicals? Okay, we'll target those. And so removing that information from the internet was viewed as a security priority. All of this is, I think, normal in a war. The concern that I have heard from a lot of my civil society colleagues in Ukraine is that they're concerned that the shrinking civic space that is happening might not be temporary. That after the war ends, it might be convenient for industry, for reconstruction, to not have to worry about process, to not go back to the consultative, transparency centered process that had been required. This is not an idle concern. On the other side of the equation, though, we are seeing the discussion around the Ukrainian process for joining the European Union and aligning Ukraine's laws, institutions, and practices with the acquis communautaire, with the European regulations. And this includes extensive provisions related to transparency, public participation, access to justice, environmental impact assessment, strategic environmental assessment, a lot of process-related aspects that engage the public. This isn't necessarily new to Ukraine. A lot of these provisions were in different aspects of the law, but they are in a number of ways expanded. They also require implementation, and that I think is an important shift. There are challenges to this discussion. First, there is and will continue to be a priority on rapid reconstruction and development, and particularly with mineral development. Second, there's limited capacity for implementation. Ukraine does have staff that work on environmental impact assessment, but these processes take time. They take much more staff than Ukraine has if you take into account all the damage that needs to be reconstructed. And there's also kind of a political reality that once the conflict stops, there will be money flowing in for reconstruction, and some of it's going to come through the trust fund and the extraction of the minerals. A lot of it's going to come from elsewhere, but the reality is that there are other conflicts in the world, and there's often a push to do as much as you can while the money's there before the next conflict diverts attention and resources. I want to just kind of highlight the fact, and this was something that Saleem alluded to and Volodymyr spoke to. There have been historic social conflicts, sometimes getting violent, over minerals and natural gas. And these conflicts historically have been aggravated by the lack of transparency and consultation. Accordingly, I would like to suggest 3 measures. First is just a recognition and an emphasis on the importance of restoring and strengthening transparency and public participation, especially in the context of mineral extraction. Second is capacity. We need to think about secondment of officials and others to help, at least on a transitional basis, build Ukrainian capacity to go through all these processes. And third, based on experiences in dozens of other places, I'm curious what Saleem thinks about this, where there have been local conflicts over mineral extraction. I would suggest consideration of some sort of benefit sharing with local communities, that the communities bear a lot of the burden of pollution, the social impacts. They also see a lot of people making a lot of money, and if money's not going back into local schools, health clinics, infrastructure, that is often a flashpoint for tensions. In closing, I'd like to highlight the fact that conflict and peace is multi-scalar and multi-layered. Critical minerals are central to international diplomatic processes, as we've heard earlier. They're also central to local conflicts. In some instances, the concerns and the actors are similar. But we also see that sometimes local conflicts focus on issues that are not necessarily highlighted in the international processes. And it's important to unpack these different sets of tensions and conflict. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Carl, for your intervention. I will check if there are any questions from the audiences. Would anybody like to ask a question on this intervention? Okay, so we don't have questions, so I think I will go back to Saleem to maybe conclude, and because you are on the subject, a geologist, so I think maybe you can give us some concluding remarks on our interventions and on our panel to see how did we do on this panel.
So thank you so much. I think given that this venue is focused on the Black Sea and the Balkans particularly, I would suggest also that there is greater attention paid to the countries in the region who have a history and experience with mining. Of course, Turkey has a long history with mining, and they have a lot of capacity, research capacity, as well as experience dealing with environmental and social conflicts around mining. And especially, for example, boron mining. Turkey has been one of the largest producers of boron in the world. You also have in the Balkans a lot of experience with mining. And in fact, one of the major lithium projects that was proposed in Serbia, as you may remember, 2 years ago, became a major political issue and was a key factor in the election that was highlighted by both parties who were contenders in the election in the end. And so I think it would be really important to consider within the Balkans and Black Sea region what is happening with extractive industries, and to develop a mechanism and dialogue process for this region itself. Romania, of course, has had a long experience with environmental conflicts in mining, especially the Roșia Montana mine, the gold mine, which was a subject of major controversy for years with a Canadian company. And also you have, of course, in Kosovo, the Trepča mining complex was one of the factors that was often argued for as being a reason why there was so much interest in Kosovo in terms of its resources. So there is a lot of experience and history in the Balkans and the Black Sea region where there has been no coordination mechanism. And perhaps this is something which the European Union, as well as the United States, can also play a role in to try and provide capacity and coordination and lesson drawing so that you can learn from these past challenges And how can then we actually use minerals as a means of economic diplomacy, which is what President Trump has been arguing for, and I think has been a really important way to think outside the box around these issues. I think this is an opportunity for us to consider ways in which minerals are not just part of the problem, but they are part of the solution. And then the other side of this, which is very important, and our colleague from Finland will appreciate this, the minerals are not just coming from mines. We have a lot of minerals which are now already in use. And Finland has been one of the leaders in the European Union around the circular economy. I attended the first World Circular Economy Forum, which was held in Helsinki. And the work that has been done by the Finn government to say, look, we are okay with mining too, and Finland has been very proactive in actually being willing to have mineral exploration, but we also want to see what is the low-hanging fruit in terms of getting minerals from existing products and building that into. As a systems scientist, my goal is we look at, it doesn't matter whether the metal is coming from a mine or it's coming from an existing source. What matters is the metal is available, right? So we need to figure out a mechanism whereby you see that from a full systems perspective, because that way you'll be able to manage the environmental and social conflicts, and you will also be able to provide those resources, whether it's for green technologies or it's for national defense. All of that can be done in a much more ecologically and economically efficient way. So those are just some thoughts as the audience may consider this moving forward. But we have a few minutes. If there's some final questions around that, happy to address those too.
Okay. Are there any questions from the audience? I think it's time for a coffee break for everybody. So thank you so much, Saleem. Thank you so much, Carl, for being here. And we really enjoyed listening to you. And I hope we'll be able to hear from you in the future also. So on behalf of our organization, on behalf of the organizers, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you. Take care.